Hello friends and welcome back. Welcome to Health, Music and Fitness channel. And in this video we'll be talking about electrocardiography, and I'll be basically teaching the students, the beginners, on how to interpret ECG. ECG is short form for electrocardiography, and we'll be talking in detail later on, but I'll try to cover the basics of electrocardiography in the first 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm sure if you understand the first 15 minutes of this lecture, of this video, you will be able to interpret all simple and complex rhythms of the heart. And ECG is just like maths, and if you know 1, 2, 3 till 0, and then any combination of these numbers, you can make sense of it. ECG is just like that. So if you know the basics and of the ECG, you can interpret any complex rhythm of ECG, and you don't have to by heart anything in electrocardiography. It is just like maths. It's vectors and electrical conduction, and I'll be talking about it in detail in the subsequent chapter. Welcome back. So I'll be using my notes which I have made for students, which I make for students when I teach them ECG in the hospital, on rounds, and otherwise in the classes, and that will be more creative, and it will help me in covering the topic faster. So we'll start. So to begin with, we need to know why we want to do ECG and what are the uses of ECG. I know you want to just be ready to interpret the ECG, but for that you have to know why we should do ECG. So there are so many things you can find out on electrocardiography. You can check the heart rate of the patient, you can check the rhythm, and you can come to know the axis where the electrical current is directed to in the heart, and you can diagnose various diseases, and you can diagnose coronary artery disease and hypertensive heart disease and many other systemic diseases which you can diagnose on electrocardiography. And for example, SLE, rheumatic heart disease, infective endocarditis, and these diseases, dengue fever, and these disorders will affect almost every cell in the body, and they can cause serositis, they can cause myocarditis, pericarditis, epicarditis, endocarditis, papillitis, valvulitis, and so on. So you can see a variety of changes in the ECG depending on whether the particular chamber of the heart is dilated or not. So you will get features of dilated heart or dilated left ventricle or right ventricle, hypertrophic changes you can make out. And for example, dengue fever, it can affect the conducting system of the heart, and many times dengue fever patients, they will present to you with first degree AV blocks and things like that. And SLE, for example, it causes lip and sac endocarditis, and otherwise also it can cause vasculitis, and the vasculitis patients, they can present with in different forms, and coronary artery disease can also be precipitated because of vasculitis. I think we are deviating from the topic, but we'll come back to the topic soon. And then there are so many other things which you can diagnose. For example, the drug which you are giving to the patient, for example digoxin, and if you give digoxin, you can see digitalis effect in the heart in the ECG, and sometimes the patient goes into digitalis toxicity. So there is a digitalis toxicity sign in the ECG, which you will be able to pick up, and you should know what are the ECG changes of a particular medication like digoxin, and because the therapeutic index is very low, therapeutic window is very low of digoxin, and also we should know what drug we are giving and what is the effect of this drug on the rhythm of the heart, because so many drugs they affect the QT interval, and azithromycin, macrolides, and like this is the COVID-19 pandemic time, and people have been using HCQ left and right, and the studies have shown that it affects the QT interval, it can prolong the QT interval. Domperidone, Domstal, and Perinom, and so many other drugs, they quinolones, they affect the QT interval, calcium, potassium, and if you know what changes to look for, you can diagnose hypokalemia, hyperkalemia, hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia, and things like that. The list is never ending. So like I always say, in medicine the imagination is our limit, and I also believe we should always try to think out of the box. So not always the diagnosis will be sitting there and staring at you. You have to think of the different things which could have precipitated that particular sign or symptom in that patient. And coming back to the ECG, these are few slides from the book which I have written, and it will be soon published, and so I am using those slides also in this lecture. So sometimes the patient comes to you with chest pain, and you do the ECG and the ECG is normal. So that doesn't mean the patient might not be having myocardial infarction. So definitely I will admit such a patient in coronary care unit, and I'll be vigilant. I'll be repeating the ECG every 15 minutes or every half an hour or 1 hourly, at least for the first few hours, and then maybe at least twice a day for the next 2 or 3 days. I'll be repeating the ECG depending on the patient's condition, general condition, whether it's improving, whether his chest pain is improving or not. And sometimes the ECG will be normal, first ECG will be normal, even the TROP-T test, troponin T test, that will also be normal. And it is important that you repeat the TROP-T test, and it is also important that you repeat the ECG, and always make it a habit to compare the different ECGs with the previous ECG, and then only it will make sense. So if there in the first ECG it's a normal sinus rhythm, and in the second ECG there is a subtle change, and in the third ECG there might be a very different ECG. So and then you will say that that's a dynamic change, and that could mean that usually means patient has a coronary artery disease, and because of coronary spasm or the block, the patient's ECG worsened just like a treadmill, and as you give medication, nitroglycerin or oral nitrates or beta blockers or whatever, ecosprin or clopidogrel, and the patient improves and the ECG becomes normal. So so the take home message on this slide is that you have to repeat the ECGs and compare the ECGs. Another situation will be patient with history of coronary artery disease, and he comes to you with chest pain, left-sided precordial chest pain, jabbing chest pain, and radiating to the left side of the neck, left jaw, and to the left arm, medial aspect of the left arm, typical pain suggestive of coronary spasm. And you do the ECG. This patient is already a diagnosed case of coronary artery disease, and he had an MI maybe 2 years back, and he recovered, but now he has come to you again with chest pain. You are the emergency doctor, you are the intern or the JR, junior doctor in the casualty, and you do his ECG, and you find a perfectly normal ECG, and you declare the good news to the patient and you say ki Mr. So and so, your ECG is normal, so there's nothing to worry. But be very guarded, because again you have to compare the ECGs. So always ask for the previous time ECGs of the patient, 2 years back ECGs, and you compare. So supposing there was like this patient, this hypothetical patient, he had chest pain, he had MI, and at that time it showed T wave inversion, fully evolved phase of MI. It showed T wave inversion in the anterior leads. But now the patient again had MI, he came with chest pain, you did the ECG, ECG is normal, the T waves are upright, and you find nothing wrong. But if you compare, there is a dynamic change. So that is called pseudo normalization of the T wave, because the vector has changed, MI has occurred, necrosis has occurred again, and the electrical axis has changed. So that's a very serious situation, and you should admit the patient even if the ECG is normal. So again, the take home message on this slide is MI is a clinical diagnosis, and the rest of the things are very supportive. So if the ECG complements a diagnosis, it is very good. Sometimes the ECG changes will come after 6 hours, 7 hours, and sometimes the troponin T test might not come positive at all, and in subendocardial infarction it might not come positive, and sometimes it will come positive after few hours. So we cannot wait for that long, because view the therapeutic window to give thrombolysis, to thrombolize the patient with streptokinase or urokinase or tenectipase or whatever, is very small, and the best effects you will see if you give these drugs, thrombolytic therapy, in the first 4 hours, first 6 hours. And my thesis was on thrombolytic therapy in patients presenting with acute myocardial infarction before 6 hours, and the comparison with those presenting between after 6 to 24 hours. And it was shown that streptokinase was helpful even after 6 hours, but the best effects you will see if you give it as soon as possible. So there should be no delay. Once the patient has come to you with myocardial infarction, you have to be very fast. On a ward footing, you have to shift the patient to from casual to ICU. There should be no delay. Start the IV line, give instructions to the patient, stand there and make sure the streptokinase is started as soon as possible within 5 or 10 minutes. So that should be your speed of action when you are handling a cardiac emergency. Hello friends, welcome to Health, Music and Fitness channel, and we were discussing about why we should do ECG and what all things we can diagnose on the electrocardiography. So apart from all the things we discussed in the previous slides, like the electrolyte changes and myocardial infarctions and autoimmune diseases and conditions like dengue fever and rheumatic heart diseases and SBE and pulmonary embolism. Apart from this, as a medical student, as a MBBS student, you have to know that the vitals of the patient are very important. You should always check the vitals, you should always give importance to the vitals, and when you come for rounds every day in the morning, always look at the chart, vitals chart, always look at the pulse, always look at the blood pressure, always temperature, respiration, oxygen saturation, intake output, and these things will give you an insight into how your patient is doing. And mind you, no patient will suddenly deteriorate. They will give you a lot of time to save them, and during this time they will be having subtle changes in their pulse. Maybe the heart rate will keep on increasing gradually, or maybe the blood pressure will be rising or falling consistently, and the respiratory system, maybe it is increasing. Sorry for the interruption, my dogs were troubling me, they were hitting the table and I had to stop them. So we were discussing about the vital signs. So always give importance to the vitals of the patient, and so same is true for the heart rate. if you are the treating doctor or the doctor on duty in ICU, and you have 10 patients, and on the central monitor you see the rhythms of all the patients in the console, and one particular patient, the heart rate is increasing consistently, and that should concern you, and you should think why the patient's heart rate is increasing. Is he bleeding somewhere? Is the dose of the drug or medication a little too much and you should decrease it? Does the patient need beta blockers, or is it some sort of respiratory embarrassment? Has the old patient developed pneumothorax, tension pneumothorax, and he's on a ventilator and the ventilator is pumping and causing tension pneumothorax, and the heart rate is increasing, trying to compensate for the hypoxia? So like this, your patient will give you a lot of time, and you have to pick up the telltale signs. Sometimes you will start a simple thing like some antibiotic like Augmentin, and that is amoxicillin, and it's a penicillin, and amoxicillin and clavinic acid, and you notice that the heart rate of your patient has started increasing over a few days, and the V's which he had little bit has worsened. Maybe that patient had COPD, and that should raise your concern, and should think about subclinical hypersensitivity to penicillin, hypersensitivity reaction, and you should change the antibiotic and maybe start him on cephalosporins or some other group of medication, maybe some quinolones or macrolides. And for respiratory tract infection, all this group of antibiotics, they work good. And like this, you have to make sense of everything. So if on the console you see increased heart rate or decreased heart rate, and that should make you think why. And always, like I always teach my students on the rounds in the clinics, that always keep on asking yourself when, why, what, where, how, and you will realize there is so much to be learned, and we know so much, and we should be able to answer everything. Why the pulse is 50, why the pulse is 120, and why the patient's blood pressure is 80/60 and the patient is fine. Does he have adrenal insufficiency? And why the patient's heart rate is irregular? Does he have mitral stenosis or hyperthyroidism or atrial MI? And atrial MI is one of the causes of atrial fibrillation, and most of the times we don't even think about atrial MI as the cause of atrial fibrillation. I think now we'll start. We'll go into how to learn the ECG. And I love this picture, and it's a very nice saint sitting and meditating, and this is the state your mind should be in when you interpret an ECG. That's why I put this picture, because if you are very tense and you want to just diagnose the disease your patient is having, and you will just bypass the basic steps of the ECG interpretation, and you will miss so many things. And so you have to be very calm when you read the ECG. The first step is you should know about the ECG paper, and these are ECG rhythms, as you can see, and this is ECG of one patient. And first important step is calibration of the ECG, and you should know about the ECG paper, the squares, the sizes of the squares and what they mean, the height and the duration, the voltage and the duration. So first step in ECG is you have to look at this calibration. It has to be 10 millimeter in height, and there should be horizontal plateau, and then 10 millimeter fall, and it should be vertical, and there should be no deviation of the plateau. It should not be like this, because if your plateau is like this, it is going up or going down, so that will give a false R wave or a false Q wave, and that will be very misleading, and you can misdiagnose the patient. And in fact, if you are given an ECG to interpret and the calibration is not provided, you can ask, sir, kindly provide me the calibration of the ECG so that I can know that this complexes of the are of normal voltage and duration, and so that it will help me in the diagnosis. So it has to be 10 millimeter rise, plateau, 10 millimeter fall. So that is the proper calibration. And most of the times we don't look at the calibration, but it is very important. Sometimes in ECGs, like patient who has severe left ventricular hypertrophy or hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, their R waves will be very tall, so tall that they will not fit in the ECG paper. This ECG paper is very small in height, and the R waves will bypass, the stylus will shoot up. So the machine senses that, and it automatically decreases the size of the R wave of the calibration. So instead of 10 millimeter rise, it will be just 5 millimeter rise. So according to that, like I will tell you how to calculate the voltage and how to calculate the different voltage criteria. So if this is 5 millimeter instead of 10, so it means if you didn't look at this calibration and you just looked at this R wave, and let us say it is 5, 6, 7, it is 7 small squares in height. But if this calibration is just a 5 millimeters, so it means the R wave is actually 14 millimeters. It is not 7, it is 14 millimeters, and there you will go wrong. So in your MCQ, if the calibration is not provided, you should ask for calibration, because if this is half, then the ECG graph showing the R wave is half. If it is 5, it actually means it is 10 volts, millivolts. And so that is the importance of calibration. Welcome back. So till now you have come to know why we should do ECG, what is the importance of ECG, and why we should do ECG, what are the things you can diagnose on ECG, and you also know what is calibration and what is the importance of calibration. And just to summarize, the calibration curve should be 10 millimeters in height, and then there should be a horizontal plateau and a 10 millimeter fall. And if the plateau is horizontally inclined or declined, and that means you will get a false R wave where there should not have been a R wave, or a Q wave, or a false S wave. So that can cause you to misdiagnose the ECG. So after you have known this, the next step in learning the ECG you should know is about the ECG paper. So as you can see the ECG paper in ECG rhythm in front of you, ECG paper has small squares and big squares, and there are 5 small squares in one big square. So you have to remember this, and one small square is 0.04 seconds in duration horizontally. So horizontally we calculate the time. So this is time and this is the voltage. So vertically we calculate the voltage, and one small square is 0.1 millivolts. So 10 small squares will be 1 millivolt. And similarly, I told you one small square is 0.04 seconds in duration, and there are 5 small squares in one big square. So that is 5 fours are 0.20, so 0.2 seconds in duration. So one big square is 0.20 seconds in duration. It is very important because when we will go to the how to calculate the heart rate, this will be important. So vertically we calculate the voltage, and horizontally we calculate the time. And also at this point you should know the speed at which the ECG paper is moving. These days we have electronic machines, so they sense the rhythm of the heart and they store that in the chip inside the machine, and then they print all the leads together. But when we were students and we used to do the ECGs on our patients ourselves, so we had mechanical machines, and we used to take lead by lead by lead ECG of the patient. So in that we could adjust the speed of the ECG paper. Why that is important is because sometimes your patient will present with very fast heart rate. The patient will have severe paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia with a heart rate of 120, 140, 160, and or sometimes the patient will present with ventricular tachycardia. So you need to know whether there is a P wave or there is no P wave. So in that case, you can increase the speed of the ECG paper from 25 millimeters per second to 50 millimeters per second, and that will make the P waves appear very nicely if there are P waves hidden in a very fast tachycardia in which you are not seeing the P wave otherwise. So this is all about the ECG paper. So 3 points you have to remember. Horizontally you have to calculate the duration 0.0 seconds, 0.04 seconds, and one big square has 5 small squares, and vertically we calculate the voltage. So one small square is 0.1 millivolts, 10 small squares will be 1 millivolt. So this you have to remember, and we'll meet in the next class.